everyone, I'm the Weather Dude. Welcome back, and today we're going to be doing something that you guys have been waiting for about a month now. We're going to take a look at my official second overall winter forecast for 2023 through 2024. And definitely be sure to stay tuned all the way through this video because towards the end is where I'll be giving my official forecast, self-made maps of what this winter can end up looking like. This is going to be my second outlook. And of course, do not forget to subscribe and ring the bell notifications if you have not already. Still, a majority of you are not subscribed, and I would greatly appreciate it. And let's get right into the video. All right, so starting off here, we're going to take a look at the El Nino advisory that has been released by the National Oceanic Atmospheric Administration, which basically says that El Nino conditions are now observed. Sometimes, like you've seen maybe in the past several months where it says El Nino watch, that has now been in a common advisory, kind of like when a winter storm watch becomes like a warning or an advisory, because that means that conditions are here and they have been observed, which means we're officially in an El Nino. And this El Nino is anticipated to continue through the northern hemisphere spring with an 80% chance even through March, April, and May of 2024. So this could hold. Now, that doesn't mean it will continue to be a strong El Nino because we know that this El Nino is supposed to be a stronger one, but we're going to talk about the strength of it coming up as well. But in broad terms, the El Nino is anticipated to continue through the spring with an 80% chance of that. This is the latest graph here released just a few days ago by the Bureau of Meteorology, all right, from Australia, and you can see where the El Nino kind of is right now. So here's a month-to-date value for October. All right, we're sitting in a pretty moderate level, and this is anticipated by their modeling to strengthen significantly and kind of peaking right around that DJF timeframe, so December, January, February. And it could peak in the very strong territory before starting its descent into the spring, but still, again, in El Nino territory, well above that red dotted line, which will constitute the El Nino. And you can see their ensemble modeling definitely does agree with that we will be strengthening into a stronger El Nino and then weakening. However, the question is, maybe some of these models don't have it getting that much stronger than it is right now, but still pretty strong. Some models have it getting ridiculously strong, like levels we haven't seen in decades. So exactly where that El Nino goes will also be one of the factors that helps, steer where this winter season could potentially go. If we look at the CFS ensembles, all right, you can kind of see now, according to them, we have peaked in terms of where we are in the El Nino, like how strong we get. So they seem to think that we're going to stick around. I think that's pretty realistic, honestly. We could still go a little bit higher. I think where we are right now is pretty much where we're going to stay, but we still definitely could get stronger, especially, in the longer term over the next couple or few months. But according to the CFS, that we're going to probably peak around between 1.5 degrees and 2 above average, and then start its descent here. And then maybe by springtime, we're closing in on a weaker El Nino once again. And we could even be back to ENSO neutral by the summer or late spring. So that seems to be what the CFS is calling for. All right, if we take a look here at the sea surface temperature anomalies at the moment, you can see again your Nino 3-4 region pretty much right in here, kind of like below Hawaii, kind of like in this middle area, right, in the tropical Pacific. All right, and you can definitely see where we have some stronger, some even warmer sea surface temperatures, or at least higher departures. In the Nino, this is called a Nino 1-2 zone right here. And then Nino 3 would be here. 4 would be about here, and then 3-4, which is what you hear, Nino 3-4, that's in the middle. So in case you guys didn't know that. So yeah, so like Nino 3 would be kind of like this, Nino 4 would be like this, and then 3-4 is what splits that in the middle. Because some people get confused, like what's Nino 3-4? So that's just a little bit of a brief explanation to those that do not know. But yes, the sea surface temperatures have certainly been warming up, and the anomalies have been getting further above average, which makes sense. Our El Nino has been strengthening over the past few months. Right? I wouldn't say it's doing so at a rapid pace, but more at a steady pace. If we look at back where we were in August, we were hovering around 1 degree in terms of the anomaly, right, above average. We are now sitting at 1.2. Right now, that was a gain in about 2 months, so it's about 0.1 degrees per month. So that's not a rapid increase, but it's certainly a steady increase. Think about it, that's only in 2 months. Right, so that means for the year, that could be. We could be getting closer to around 2 degrees of anomaly if it keeps on this trend. Of course, we know it goes up and down a lot, so this could certainly change. But in terms of from where we were at the beginning of August till now, so about 2 or closer to 3 months out, honestly, we've gained about 0.2 degrees on the anomaly. So that's just a little update on where we're standing there. If we take a look at the CFS, it's kind of like model version because we saw their ensembles of what they're calling for sea surface temperatures. But this helps to show an average of those model runs, what we could be looking at here. All right, so I'm going to let it start over. So this is November, December, January, February, and then March and April. So notice November and December, January, we really peak with those darker reds, and by February, March, and then on from there, we kind of start to lose it a little bit. So that's why I'm more confident in my forecast that we will probably peak again wherever that El Nino value may end up, whether it's 2.5 degrees above average, which would be a really strong El Nino, or even if it stays at 1.5. Either way, it will probably peak around December, January, and then start to fall after. So there's December, January, and then boom, you see like more of those oranges for February and then March, and then onward from there. All right, so this is what we look at for a typical El Nino. What does the El Nino typically look like? All right, so typically we have the polar jet that kind of swings down here, and it's not going to be locked up there all the time, but generally speaking, it kind of tends to go over the northern United States and kind of slightly come down into the northeast, but not really. That's why the northeast is really not shaded in anything because it's kind of like average. But because of the jet stream coming from the north like that, kind of riding down above the U.S., that causes these areas in the north central and northwest to be warmer because you're below the polar jet stream, which means you're warmer. Above it, you would be cooler. Right? And because of that as well, we also have drier conditions that set up across the Midwest, parts of the northern Tennessee Valley. All right, and then across the southeast and the Gulf Coast, south central, we typically are wetter and cooler. And then we're more so just wetter, not so much cooler, but wetter across the southwest, right? And that's because this extended Pacific jet stream, which infuses moisture into the southern United States. But because of El Nino, typically speaking, right, this is extended further east, so it's also able to bring in not just the monsoon to the southwest, but also, into parts of the southeast as well. All right, so if we take a look here, before we get into my official forecast, which is coming up in very soon, I did want to take a look at, again, kind of like from the last winter forecast video, if you guys remember, we took a look here at the kind of the composites. So in other words, taking El Ninos that we have similar to now in the past, right? So El Ninos similar to now in the past, what has typically happened. So we can get an idea, not the exact forecast, but we can get an idea of what could possibly happen in this El Nino since it's similar to on the average of all these. So this pretty much fits in with what we were talking about. You see the Midwest, parts of the northern Tennessee Valley, in those drier times, right? This is the precipitation anomaly map. We typically see the Northwest, also pretty dry, which typically lines up as well. And we do see the Southwest, South Central, Southeast, and even a little bit of the Eastern Seaboard going up the East Coast. Not so much the interior Northeast, but the East Coast, a little bit above average when it comes to precipitation. All right, and you'll see how that's factored into my forecast as well. So that is definitely something that can be noted, right? Because this is a pretty good map. Like this is pretty much what a typical El Nino looks like right here. Like this pretty much hits the, pretty much hits the nail on the head here. I would say the drier, we see like some drier conditions getting even down into Arkansas, Louisiana, Mississippi, and Alabama. That tends to vary on the strength of the El Nino. I think slightly weaker El Ninos would have more above average precipitation in this region, but stronger El Nino might be able to force that drier air a little bit further south. And pretty much, again, that one depends on the strength of the El Nino. But where you see the darker colors, it's where it's heavier, it's more enforced. So the southeast and the south central, there's higher certainty because of the higher departures in terms of precipitation above average. All right, and across, we see those darker colors across the Midwest too, but for drier times. All right, if we take a look at the temperature, now typically speaking on the temperature, this definitely did surprise me actually a little bit because these are set to the 1991 to 2020 averages, which come out every 20 years. So in 2041, we'll get the 2021 to 2040 maps, but these are based on the latest averages. But you can see, pretty much not a lot of places are warm, and my best explanation for this is because even though a typical El Nino, as you saw on that map before, it said warmer, that doesn't mean it is warmer, but we can still get very cold, right? And again, as I said in many videos before, El Nino is not the only thing that determines what your winter is like. We take a look at the oscillations many times before, the 3 different ones, and we're gonna keep looking at them in future videos because those are some of the things again that also determine what a winter could look like. But typically speaking, we see the much of the country cooler times for an El Nino of this similar strength, but it's more enforced, it's more emphasized on the southwest, south central, southeast, and kind of like in the southern mid Atlantic regions, right? Where those departures are greater than 2 to 3 degrees below average, right? And outside of there, a lot of places, maybe between a degree or two or so below average. And there are a couple spots up there in the north central that are about half a degree to a degree above average. But generally speaking, northwest, north central has in the past has been typically around average to about slightly above average in terms of temperatures. All right, now what you guys have all been waiting for, our updated forecast. So we have precipitation, temperature, and then an overall map, just like we did in the first one, to kind of show you what could happen, more on a broader spectrum. So our updated precipitation forecast, I kept it pretty similar. I have certainly made some changes. Definitely looks different. One of the more noticeable changes is that the precipitation is slightly above average kind of zone, this lighter green, has been lifted a little bit further north because the Pacific jet stream kind of goes in a pattern like this. So I think that's able to infuse a little bit more moisture further north than originally expected. So I think we'll still see some above average precipitation, and it could even go further north than this, but this is the updated forecast as of now. We also see it kind of going again up the eastern seaboard with a slightly above average precipitation, because we've seen that in the past, and especially if we get like those nor'easters like we like to get in El Ninos, that'll really make a dent, or if you will, be a big factor in the precipitation outlook. But where it's more certain in the southeast and the Gulf Coast is where it's more certain that we see above average precipitation. Right, so places like Houston, New Orleans, Atlanta, Charleston, South Carolina, Greenville, North Carolina, Wilmington, North Carolina, even Orlando, Florida, all places that could be above average. A little bit more. We're a little bit more confident in that the above average temperatures to be across kind of the southeast here, more pertain to the Gulf Coast. Now, how about the drier zones? Northwest will definitely be one that's drier, as is typical, but more emphasized across places like Idaho, Montana, as well as the Midwest. The Midwest, I felt really confident putting this one in, the darker brown, because the Midwest, we've seen it with the typical El Nino mass. We've seen it with, as well as pertaining to what happened in the past. We've seen those darker colors kind of emphasized on the Midwest. And I definitely think that this slightly below average zone could be extended a little bit further to the south. But the middle here is kind of like a mixed bag, because that's where we like to get our wintry battle zone. Because again, it all depends on how the jet stream sets up, the polar jet, Pacific jet. Because we know that if these two get really close or even touch, we know that's where it really forms, those big low pressure systems, those big coastal storms and nor'easters that we've all, grown to known over the years. But definitely, I do think the north central and especially the northwest and midwest will be drier than average for this winter. Now, flipping over to temperature, definitely been some changes here as well. All right, slightly above average, I would say, across much of the north central into the Midwest, but is more emphasized across kind of like the northern and eastern Dakotas, coming down just to about Chicago and then coming out through Wisconsin, Minneapolis, Bismarck, some areas that are in here, Milwaukee as well, Chicago. All right, in those above average zone, more emphasized we have a higher likelihood that it's going to be above average, because typically speaking, right, the main player is that polar jet stream that comes down. It's typically further north. Right, so when you're south of the polar jet, you are warmer. North, you would be colder, right? It's just vice versa. So that's what it's going to look like there for the north. And then for the south, slightly below average because of the Pacific jet. Again, Pacific jet stream tends to promote kind of like cool and wet, kind of like, that damp, cold rain that, that I'm sure we all despise, right? Like either have it be warm or have snow, right? But that damp, cool, kind of rainy pattern is the picture I'm trying to paint here. And that certainly is going to be true across these areas in the southwest, Gulf Coast, southeast, even up the mid-Atlantic. We could see some slightly below average temperatures, although again, this does tend to vary, year to year. But in this case, I do think parts of the mid-Atlantic will end up being below average for this winter, but it's more emphasized across Texas, the Gulf Coast. Again, same areas, just like with the above average zone of precipitation, the below average zone here of temperatures will fall. So again, Orlando, Charleston, Atlanta, Mobile, New Orleans, Dallas, San Antonio, all areas that will be a higher likelihood of seeing those below average temperatures for this winter. All right, now the map you've all been waiting for, the winter 2023 to 2024 overall forecast number 2. I just want to make this clear, this is not final. We still probably have at least another one or two most likely another one or two more forecasts to make before the official one comes. But this is the second overall forecast for the winter of 23 to 24. And this is a lot to break down. There's certainly a lot more colors and zones than there were on the first one. So I'm going to break this down by moving in a generally in an east to west direction. All right. It's not going to be perfect, but I'll get to every zone, but I'm going to move kind of like an east to west direction. Starting off here with the Northeast, blizzard potential. All right. This could be the case for New England because, as we all know, during El Nino, there likes to be a lot of coastal storms, which is highlighted by the red zone here. But there tends to be colder air trapped up in New England. So when these coastal storms move up the coast, I do think the higher chances for heavier snow from those will be held up to New England. All right, so pretty much New York City points northeast. But in the red zone, in this coastal storm zone, that doesn't mean you're going to see rain. You're still going to see sometimes rain and sometimes some heavy snow. But I just think the higher likelihood for heavier snows consistently will be in that pink zone. But red coastal storms, again, we all know nor'easters typically do happen during an El Nino because there's a higher risk because of that Pacific jet kind of getting extended here and the polar jet coming down from the north. Of course, that leads to the greater potential of a storm forming when the two of them get close or even touches, as I've said before. So again, higher threat of coastal storms on the eastern seaboard. All right. Next, we got lake effect snow that will still be a threat here, especially Lake Erie, Lake Ontario, all places that are going to see it. All right, you can even see Chicago could even get some. The UP of Michigan could get some, right? Buffalo, Cleveland, we all know their areas that famously get, these dozens of inches of, even tons of feet of lake effect snow. And that certainly could be a threat this year, okay? Because the warmer air that initially comes in, that makes those waters warm. So if cold air comes in this winter, that could lead to even more lake effect snow than we usually get. So we're going to have to keep an eye on you guys there for sure. An orange zone here across the Midwest, drier and milder. Again, pretty much like you saw with a combination of my temperature and precipitation maps, this shouldn't come as no surprise. Again, because of typically where that polar jet is going to be setting up. We still will have some cold shots. That'll be the dark blue areas, places like St. Louis, Indianapolis, Cincinnati, Louisville, Kentucky, all areas that like Des Moines as well. That will still see some cold shots. All right, and I think that there'll be. I'll talk about more of that in just a second of what the cold shots could look like for both of these zones. We move south a little bit to the wintry mix, right? The famous winter battle zone, right? Rain, sleet, ice, snow, all of it, pretty much. So this will be places like OKC, Little Rock, Arkansas, Nashville, Knoxville, Tennessee, Asheville, North Carolina. Although you are a little bit more elevated, so, but still, you could still see some more rain, ice, and snow. But those more mountainous areas, near the Smoky Mountains, for example, could be more snow than ice. But still, that wintry battle zone will be about there. If we take a look at the south central and southeast, pretty much the areas that were in the darker blue and darker green on my temperature and precipitation maps, right? Cool and wet, that's pretty much going to be the gist there for you guys in that teal. Again, Dallas, San Antonio, points east to Atlanta, down south to Orlando, Miami. Again, cool and wet is probably going to be the story for you guys for this winter. All right, now let's take a look at the stormier and cooler, right? Now, you might think, well, what's the difference between this one and this one? It's the same thing. Well, more so of a cool rain across the southeast and south central. Over the southwest here, a little bit more lift is in place to increase the risk of thunderstorms. So it will be cooler, but a little bit more stormier than, say, the people in this zone, right? So that's the difference between these two. We take a look at the light blue, less prevalent cold shots. Now, why do I think so? Because the jet stream, so if you look at it, the polar jet in an El Nino kind of comes down like this. Typically speaking, again, not all the time, but typically does something like that. So the closer you are to it, the more likely you are to get at least a little bit cooler air than people to the west of it. So if you're over here, you are further away from the jet stream than if you are over here where you're only about this far. So we will still see cold shots coming in here and here as well, but they'll just be less prevalent as, say they are usually. And then the yellow, we will still see the Arctic blast because, of course, it will be colder when you go further north. But again, they will also be a little bit less prevalent than they normally are. Hopefully that cleared things up there. If we take a look at the black, again, our typical mountain snow might be a little underwhelming, but definitely to start out here, I'm definitely being impressed by the amount of mountain snow and big snowstorms that we're already getting moving through here. So the season in general could still turn out to be somewhat of a typical mountain snow season, what we usually get up in the mountains and the Rocky Mountains. Parts of California, Nevada, like Los Angeles, Las Vegas, Los Angeles, San Francisco, even parts like around Reno, Nevada. Pretty much gonna be a stormier pattern again. That same thing I've explained before, Pacific jet stream. But you guys are again also a little bit closer to that Pacific jet, so you could be cooler at times. Now, if we move north, Northern California, northwestern Nevada, you guys could be slightly drier because you're further away from that Pacific jet stream. And again, typically in the northwest, we are drier and warmer, which is what this zone is right here. So Portland, Seattle, you guys could be in more of a warmer or drier. So kind of like those areas that are in that maroon color could end up again being warmer and drier because of where the jet streams are going to set up, and that's also typical of what we see during El Nino. All right, so that's going to about do it for today's video. Thank you guys for watching. This was my winter 2023 to 2024 forecast number 2. Again, as I've said, this is not final. All right, but I hope this was exciting. I know it's been a month since the last one, so I was excited to get this out here to you guys. Definitely stay tuned because in videos we're going to give like little discussions and updates about the winter as well. All right, and talk about what snowstorms are coming up. So hopefully you guys will enjoy that. And stay tuned for future uploads. I am the Weather Dude signing off till next time. I'll catch you guys in the next video.